All right, folks. Welcome back to another edition. As always, we got the big man in the house. How we doing, Big Rob?
Good on yourself there, Tom.
I'm good, buddy. I'm good. Weather looks pretty cold next week, Rob. I think we're starting to finally get that winter cold front coming in.
Yeah, I mean, going out today was freezing, and then what? We're supposed to get like 3 inches out my way tomorrow, at least. So
Really?
not looking good. Yeah,
I didn't see that. I just saw the teens for next week. Besides that one week in December, I think, like I said before, I think we've been pretty lucky, but it looks like we haven't escaped yet. I feel like we might get pounded this last month before, spring arrives.
I just hope that it could be cold. Just don't dump snow on us. Just that's fine.
I agree with that.
Keep it dry and keep it cold. That's fine.
Right. Well, you know where it wasn't cold at, and that was at the American Express. Did you catch any of that over the weekend?
I watched a little bit here and there. I didn't, I saw Rahm and Davis go back a little bit. That was pretty impressive the first few days by Davis, man. I'm sorry, his putting was pretty sick.
Yeah, you talking about Thompson?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kid.
Yeah, that flat stick was rolling, man. I felt bad for him on what was it, 17 when it hit the stick?
Yeah, I think that kid could be something, man. He's got a solid game.
Yeah, that was impressive, and even that chip on 18 was good. It's just that whole game looked pretty good. I mean, the couple eagles I caught him put in, and it was entertaining for sure. What I watched, I mean, Rambo. I think I called that, didn't I? But I mean, obviously, it's one of those fields that he's supposed to win it anyways. But yeah, it was pretty good. I always like to. I think we talked about it before, but the contrast in the fairway and the rough, with the overseeding and everything. So.
Oh yeah, you sure did call that. We both called it. You loved that pick. I liked it as well. Again, Rambo is on a tear. For whatever reason, I just had a feeling going into the end of the year, the guy was pissed off, man. And Rambo pissed off is not a good thing. It's like poking the bear. But yeah, I mean, he just seems super hungry, and this could be a massive year for him. Guy's on a tear. I mean, we saw this last year from Scotty. It was almost like, after every tournament that ended, you're like, dude, this guy won again. Like, what's going on? And to your point, last week, what is this? This is now Callaway's third event in a row.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Speaking of Callaway, did you see that they signed Bob Does Sports?
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Was that today?
Today.
It was announced today?
Yep.
Which is shocking because some of those videos earlier, the stealths talking about the stealths and whatnot.
Yeah, I think mainly, if I had to guess, I think Fat Perez was probably the one who was able to pick because I think he's a Callaway guy. I don't think Bob and
Joey
Gutsy, I don't think they really cared.
I've always tried to zoom, figure out what clubs Joey's playing and what clubs Perez is playing for irons wise, because I could never really tell from that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head what Perez was before that. I think he had kind of a mixed bag. I'm not sure what his irons were, but nonetheless, I mean, good for them.
Yeah, I mean, all the influencers now. I mean, I think they got everybody between all the big brands and all the top influencers. So you got influencers. I did pay more attention to the LPGA this weekend though, because I wanted to see what the foreplay boys did. Thought it was very interesting how you could follow it online with the Stableford and everything. So that was entertaining.
Same. I listened to their pod too last night on the way home about it. Basically, they were just saying how nervous they were and how it's not the same as, going out and just filming around like they normally do. So they knew they were going to catch a ton of slack.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Especially, Riggs for shooting like an 88 or whatever he shot.
And then Frankie, went 87, I think, on Sunday. So got him by 1 point or something like that. So
that's funny. What they were talking about too, is Riggs was pissed that Frankie got him. But I don't know, for whatever reason, I've kind of been off the foreplay pod lately.
I still watched it just to see what they would have done.
Oh yeah, I mean, I still enjoy watching some of their content, but I don't know. I think it's D-Rap. I'm not a fan of D-Rap.
Yeah,
Lurch was whatever. I think he added some value there, but when he was there, but it just, I don't know. Maybe it's just old news. Not sure, but I mean, I still continue to listen to their podcasts here and there. It's decent, but yeah, those guys were saying how ridiculously nervous they were the entire time. Like it just never went away. So they weren't used to that, and they knew they were going to catch a ton of slack. But yeah, I mean, good weekend for golf. Good ending to another tournament.
Did you see the whole Reed thing with Rory today on the driving range?
Yeah. Tried to say hi to him and then threw a tee at him.
Right.
I don't need. I was that even real?
I don't know. I mean, working all day today, I was just checking Twitter a little bit and saw multiple tweets about it. Didn't see an article about it or any pictures, but it's like, come on now. If that's true, we're to that level now.
Right.
So silly. That'll make the Masters interesting, right? I mean, with all these together.
Yeah, the Masters is going to be awesome. Speaking of next week, Rob, we have the Farmers, and we're going to jump right into the Bookie with T picks. Who do you like this week?
Do you think Rahm goes back to back?
I mean, good possibility.
He does like Torrey, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I'm going to stick with that.
Going Rambo again?
Mm-hmm.
He is hot, but it is awfully hard to go, back to back to back. So
this restart, yeah.
Right. But T's picks, his long shot, Rogers 130-1, Stallings 110-1, Thigala 55-1, Day, it's an awfully interesting pick, Day 25-1, and his leader or his favorite, Xander 12-1, and you could book it with T. Rob, we had an unreal guest on this past week.
Yeah, it was a great conversation, man. It was sort of eye-opening, but it was very it made you think, right? Made you, contemplate your next round for sure. At least for me, because, seeing off the tee and everything like that.
Oh, yeah. And we mentioned it last week. So for those listening, we had Lou Stagner on, and I got to apologize to Lou, Rob. I was so nervous last week. I didn't even introduce him. So everybody
you can introduce him now.
Or that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I figure most of our audience knows who Lou Stagner is. If not, Lou Stagner is he's the best on Twitter, and all he does is tweet out amateur stats via. He's a data analysis for Arcos, so he has access to just tons and tons of shots and amateur data, and that's where he does these stat comparisons on Twitter, pros versus your standard amateur. And the stats are fascinating. And to be honest, he's been hands down my favorite guest we've ever had because he speaks our language. We've had, a bunch of different guests on and they've been awesome, but there's been nobody on our show to date that has talked about amateur golf and exactly what we do. And like I said, he just spoke our language. Everything that he kind of said made sense. And, it was as he was talking, you were just like, oh yeah, wow, that's incredible. Because you're starting to think in the back of your head, sure. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't do that or whatnot.
We need to follow it. That's the biggest thing.
Right. So we had Lou on this past week. We recorded it previously. We're going to tie it in here. So check out this interview with Lou Stagner. All right, folks, welcome back. We have a very special guest, Mr. Lou Stagner, Mr. Manage Your Expectations himself. Lou, we were just talking. I don't think there's ever been a more suitable guest to have on our show. Obviously, we're a large group of amateur golfers, and you constantly put out amateur golf stats. So welcome to the show, Lou.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So, Lou, let's start in an area where there's a ton of conversation, a ton of agreement amongst not only amongst amateurs, maybe sometimes in the pro level, but obviously that's kind of outside the scope of the amateur game, if we're being honest. Let's talk about the 3-wood and the driver off the tee specifically. So statistically, does 3-wood really, 3-wood over driver off the tee for amateurs, does it really make sense?
I love that you're diving right into the controversial topic. So yeah, no easy start here. Let's just jump right into the deep end. So for most amateurs, like anything in golf, there's no absolutes, right? I can't always say always this and only this. But for many amateurs, they are better off hitting the driver. You pick up a little bit of accuracy with the 3-wood,
Sure.
but you don't pick up enough to offset the distance that you lose. So hitting driver is typically going to be the right play. Like I need a really good reason to not hit driver. Again, this is all player dependent. So, understanding how big of an area you need for your driver, and how much space in between hazards, how far away you need to have a target from a hazard if it's just on one side. Those are all really important things to know and understand. And every player is different. There's some amateur players I've worked with in the past that are, 10, 12, 15 handicaps, and they need 85 plus yards of room. So if you're on a golf course in Florida with houses on both sides, right, an OB on both sides, I'm sure you've played many of those. They need 85, 90 yards of room. And if they don't have that, they're not being optimal by hitting driver. They're going to hit too many balls out of bounds. And so for us amateurs, the most important thing is keeping the ball in play.
Right.
And so what you need to understand is how big of an area do I need to hit my driver safely? And if I have enough room, then I typically should be hitting driver. If you are going to hit 3-wood, it's typically going to be so you don't reach something. So if there's a really nasty bunker maybe that you're trying to avoid, or if there's water in play that starts at some point on the left or right hand side, and you're trying to eliminate that, and your 3-wood's not going to reach, that's when it's okay to hit the 3-wood. But if you are, standing up there and you're just saying, I really need to find a fairway here, I'm better off laying back with 3-wood, that's not the play. You just want to rip driver as much as you can.
Perfect. And not to throw my guy Rob under the bus here, but Rob, when's the last time you hit driver?
I mean, I do pull out occasionally, but I feel like more comfortable with the 3-wood, knowing that I have a better chance of going down the middle of the fairway than spraying it left and right. But I guess, how you said the distance makes sense. Maybe I just got to be more, just push the driver more.
Yeah. And, everyone is different. And so there are some players that can struggle with the driver and have need a massive area. Like you're a pretty big dude. Like I'm guessing you hit the ball pretty far. Like just knowing nothing else about your game, just looking at you, I'm guessing you get it out there. And, if you're an amateur that has some speed and you have a little face control issues, that can result in some huge misses. Right. And I used to fall into that pretty heavily, where I can miss it both ways, and I could miss it a lot both ways, some really big misses. And so if you fall into that, there are some things you could obviously do about it, go see an instructor and work on these things and try to get better. But I would encourage you to try to figure that out. The other thing that, might be interesting to try is, and I've been posting about this a little bit recently, there's been a number of people that I've known that have swapped out their driver shaft. Like, they had typical 45, 45 and a half inch shaft, and they put really short shafts in their driver. And it's amazing. You would think that they would lose distance, but they don't. What happens is it's a lot easier to strike the center of the face with a shorter shaft. It becomes easier. And so their best hits don't go as far, but their worst hits go farther because they're hitting more towards the center of the face on more of their shots. And so their overall distance kind of evens out, and they tend to pick up a little bit of accuracy, a little bit, with the shorter shafts. So that may be something to investigate for you if you're struggling with driver.
I mean, that makes sense because I find myself, especially on holes that are long and, it's tight, I find myself choking down on the driver. and taking that easier swing. And I do find the center of the face on most times. I mean, I feel like I lose a little distance, but I feel like it's more control. So that does make sense. And I think Ricky Fowler did that a few years ago, didn't he? Drop down his driver shaft, I believe. So
yeah, you'd be surprised. A lot of guys on tour, they're not playing 45.5-inch shafts, but you walk into, you buy any club and standard is around that length, typically 45.5 inches. And it's, if you're a 10, 12, 15 index, it can be tough. I just posted something today showing dispersion across the face on driver. I think I put a 15 index, a couple of 13s, and a +4 up there. And if you look at the images, and there are multiple hundreds of shots with each one of these players, and this was not representative of all 13 handicaps or all 15 handicaps. These are specific individuals over many, many sessions on GC Quad, where I can get face data. And it's amazing to see how all over the face these players are. And from some of the players I've known that have tested out the shorter shafted drivers, that strike pattern on the face goes from like all over the face to gets a little bit tighter and more towards the center.
That's super interesting. I wonder, I wonder why is the 45-inch, standard, if that's the case? Would you say? Is that just
I mean, I don't want to pick on the equipment companies.
Sure.
But I mean, I when you put a good swing on a 45.5-inch club and you hit it dead center, dead nuts, and you got a decent delivery on the club, the face isn't 8 degrees open, ball's gonna go farther, right? It's a longer shaft. It's typically you're gonna swing it a little bit faster, it's gonna go a little bit farther. But the danger for us amateur players, us weekend warriors, people that are working full time all week and can't hit balls 8 hours a day, is we hit it all over the face. And that when you're hitting an inch and a half towards the heel, that doesn't result in good outcomes. And so that shorter shafted driver is something to investigate. Now, I would caution you to not just go out in your garage and grab a hacksaw and chop 4 inches off your driver. Like, go to a fitter, because it changes swing weights.
Right,
you're going to want to get somebody to help you through the process, but it's worth testing out for sure.
That's super interesting. So speaking of that data that you just shared with us there, Lou, can you talk a little bit about what you do with Arccos? I know we discussed earlier, you got about 8 or 9 jobs, but what do you specifically do for Arccos in terms of data?
Yeah, I'm their data insights lead at Arccos, and I've been helping them on their journey as they continue to evolve and grow their application. So Arccos, for those that don't know, there are sensors that you purchase to install on the end of your grips. You either screw them in, or you can buy grips that come with sensors already in there. And then you get to the course, you open up your phone, you turn on the app, and it's going to automatically start collecting all of your shots for you, keeping track of your scores, keeping your data. And you either put your phone in your pocket, or there's a little device. I don't think anyone can see this because you guys are audio only, but it's called the Link. And if you don't want to put your phone in your pocket, you put this on your belt and right on your hip, and this collects all of your data. So you could technically get to the course, start your round, leave your phone in the car, just put this on your belt, and it's going to collect all your data for you. And then you use that to get a myriad of stats about your game to see what's going on. And so I'm helping them as they continue to evolve the product. I'm a presence on social media. I put a lot of stats out there, do some things behind the scenes, helping them with their infrastructure and things like that. So it's been awesome. They're a great group of people. And what is most exciting for me is how much they continue to evolve and make the product better. They're not content to just kind of go with what they have at the moment. They're just constantly trying to push the envelope and make things better. So it's cool to be a very, very small, tiny part of that, and kind of see what's going on behind the curtains.
Very cool. Very cool. We're also on YouTube there, Lou. So
you are. All right. So you are live. So there you go.
Yeah.
There's the link. Well,
They
you don't
will.
want
What is
people to
it?
see this face, though. That's the only problem. I'm used to audio only on my podcast. I'm not used
Yeah.
to.
Same. We're trying to grow the YouTube channel, but that is very cool. I've never seen kind of a belt application like that. That is pretty cool. I'm a little weary about using things that, especially in the golf game, that like go on your golf glove or on your hand or on the club itself. So that's kind of nice that it's kind of, hidden, so to speak, on your golf. You don't really, out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. But I also think that Arcos, I would imagine, they have a vault full of data that you have access to. And that's kind of like your little playground.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, we're creeping up on 585 million shots in there.
Holy crap.
Which, to put that in perspective, so I also have access to ShotLink, doing some work for tour players. And ShotLink is what they use on the PGA Tour to collect data. And they've been using it since 2004 was their first official year. They used it a little bit before that, but there's only 24, 25 million shots in ShotLink. And Arcos is going to hit 600 million, in the next few weeks here. So it is a massive, massive number of shots. And there's really not much that I can't look at. So if I want to know how, single digit players perform from, 127 yards in the fairway when the pin's cut on the right and the wind's coming off the left, and the moon was full that night, I got plenty of shots to see how people do in that situation.
Wow.
That's awesome.
It's that detailed.
We do have weather data.
Wow.
I don't know when the moon is full or not. I could probably figure that out, but
Right.
but yeah, we do have weather data that's part of it. And there's an AI caddy that people can use on the app while they're playing, and it takes into account wind and will give you some adjustments in real time. But I can use that after the fact to see how players are performing in different kinds of wind and how much of a difference the wind does make, whether you're into the wind, downwind,
Right.
Quartering off the left, quartering off the left, or whatever the case may be. So it's pretty fascinating to look at things like that and see how it actually impacts, performance and how big of an area we hit the ball into.
Sure. I recall that thread you actually did, what was that, last week? Or maybe the week prior, where it was basically, wind in your face or, behind your back was really the most telling between the data that you've gotten opposed to like left to right. Is that correct? Am I getting that right?
Well, yeah, I mean, wind definitely makes it, more wind, the more challenging it gets. It's interesting when you're downwind, you can, and I'm going to generalize here, but downwind, you can be a little more aggressive. You can, you don't need as much room with your driver, for example. If you typically would need, 75 yards with your driver as a safe amount of room, downwind, it's going to be less than that, because that downwind, it's going to straighten things out and it doesn't go as far offline. But into the wind, it magnifies it, right? So no wind, you'd need 75 yards. Downwind, you might need, 68 yards, and into the wind, you might need 84 yards. Just making some numbers up as I go here. So it makes a pretty big difference. And, this also applies to approach shots as well. So you can get slightly more aggressive when you're straight downwind. And you need to get a lot more conservative when you're straight into the wind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And that's super interesting. I wonder if there's any kind of, with the wind at your back, for me at least, I wonder if there's kind of a mental aspect to that, of kind of just a smoother, maybe slower swing, opposed to just your normal swing with, no variables, nothing like that. And then you have the wind in your face where you feel like you have to swing hard for some reason. I wonder if that factors into that at all.
That definitely could be, it could play a role in it, because, I know exactly what you mean when you say that, because I feel the same way downwind. It just feels different to swing when it's straight downwind versus into the wind.
Right.
You're definitely adapting and making different motions, for sure.
it's almost like you're hitting a punch, right? You kind of saw it off and hit it a little bit more smoothly.
But some people it throws a lot off. The wind definitely does have an impact, and but that being said, just the wind itself is going to magnify misses, right? Forget about what you're doing. Once the ball makes contact and it leaves, if a ball is, if the axis is a little bit tilted and it's going to spin one way, it's going to spin and curve more if it's straight into the wind, and it's going to curve less if it's straight downwind. And so that effect right there kind of helps to straighten things out when you're downwind, and to make things go a little more offline, when you're into the wind.
Gotcha. That makes a little bit more sense. Yeah.
So what is the most telling amateur stat that amateurs refuse to acknowledge because they don't think it applies to them?
Yes. All of them.
All the above.
Yeah, all the above. Boy, I don't even know where to start with that. We could probably dive into my DMs and I could come up with a laundry list of all the things that people have said are wrong and incorrect.
My favorite was about a week ago where the guy said, "You don't play in my group. Like, I don't need math in the course." It's crazy.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of the same DMs and emails with the tour. So I'm assuming, we could probably talk for days on certain DMs, but go ahead there, Lou.
Yeah. I think one of the things that always surprises people is wedge play. And I'm gonna start this with wedge play for tour players. Our exposure to tour players is, most of the time is on TV, watching them on TV. And when you're watching on TV, you're typically, the weekend rounds are going to get more of your attention. Like the viewership on Saturdays and Sundays is a whole lot bigger than Thursday and Friday. And on the weekends, you're typically seeing the best players. You're typically seeing players at the top of the leaderboard. That's what they're showing the most of. And so you're watching the best players in the world on the PGA Tour. And not only are you watching the best in the world, you're watching the best in the world that happen to be playing well. And so that combined together means we're seeing kind of a highlight reel of what's going on. It's a very different picture than overall of what's going on out there across all 4 days and all the players that are in the field. And so we have this warped impression of how good they are. Now, these PGA Tour players are incredible. They're literally the best in the world. And it still boggles my mind that there are, it's not one person, in his mom's basement that thinks he should be like a tour pro. There's a lot of people that think their stats should be similar to a tour pro because tour pros are playing harder courses and I'm playing easier courses. And that always, I don't understand that, because the PGA Tour players are literally amongst the best few hundred players on the planet. There's, 60, 65 million golfers in the world. We're talking about the best few hundred. Like, I don't think I can throw a football like Josh Allen. Like, I don't think I can dunk like LeBron or shoot threes like Steph. I can't do any of those things. But golfers, for some reason, we feel like, I should never miss the green with a wedge from 100 yards. Well, tour pros do, miss the green, I don't know, like 17% in that situation. And they're really good. They're a lot better than you. And so I think amateurs put a lot of unnecessary and incorrect pressure on themselves around how they should be performing. And I think some of that is influenced by what they see on TV. And I think what the hard part might be is, even a high handicap player every once in a while is going to hit it really pure. They're going to hit a great shot and they're going to hit it really tight. And if they were going shot for shot against a tour pro on that situation, they may have beat them in that situation. But, ask them to hit 100 shots and, the high handicap has no chance. So, wedge play is one of the stats that I think people struggle with quite a bit.
That is super interesting. Not only the PGA Tour aspect of that, and you're totally right. If you tune in on a round on like a Thursday or Friday, when the event kicks off, you'll see some not awful shots, but some errant shots, so to speak, right? And then, like you said, it kind of gets dialed in, and the gap gets narrower as Saturday and Sunday come on, especially the final round. And to your point, they are only showing the top maybe 7 guys on the leaderboard, and of course, all of those guys are playing really well that week. So I never really thought about it like that way, and it does make a ton of sense. And then also to your point too is, I think that shot that 15 handicap has is what keeps us coming back, right? It's like,
sure.
It's like, well, I could do that. I could do that over and over again. But really, to your point earlier, it's like, well, no, you can't. This game is very, very hard. And it takes a lot to be really good at it. But I think by them just getting a taste of it, in the back of some of these guys' mind, they're like, well, this really isn't that hard.
Yeah. And we have very warped expectations. And I think where that hurts amateur players is when you don't have expectations that align with your skill level, you can actually end up doing damage to yourself. And so what I mean by that is you might be a pretty decent wedge player for your skill level. We're talking about wedge play. So you might be a really good wedge player, for being a 10 handicap or a 12 handicap. But you might have expectations that are completely out of whack. They're so far out of line. And because your expectations are so far out of whack, you get around where you have a number of wedges and you hit, mediocre shots that day, or, okay shots for your skill level. And you get mad because you didn't hit it to 10 feet, and you get angry. And that anger and frustration as, reactions to, what was a really good shot for your skill level, but you got mad anyway, that ironically can cause you to start hitting wedges poorer. You can start to get worse at that skill because you think you should be better than you really should for your skill level. And you start to get mad and angry. And playing golf when you're mad and angry and frustrated and upset, pick the word, it's a hard thing to do.
Right.
And so you can cause yourself damage by doing that, which is why it's so important, in my opinion, to track your stats and understand where you are, and so that you can see how your skill level rates in every part of the game compared to different skill levels. So if you're a 10 handicap and you want to be a 5, you can see how you perform against 10 handicaps. You can see what the typical 5 handicap does. You can see what parts of your game actually need work, as opposed to guessing. And a lot of people guess. There's, you guys have heard of Justin Rose, pretty good player.
Yeah.
When he started so the story is when he started to go, and I forget who told me this. When he started working with Sean Foley, he showed up and he's like, my wedge game's horrible. It's funny, it's about wedges. My wedge game's horrible. I'm a horrible wedge player. And Sean Foley went and looked at the numbers and he's like, what are you talking about? You're like the second best wedge player on the PGA Tour. Like, what do you? But he had this warped sense about his own wedge game. So we have these internal biases, and then we feed those when you hit a kind of a squirrely wedge shot, and that confirmation bias kicks in, and you say to yourself, I'm a horrible wedge player. And when you hit a good one, you're like, well, I should always do that. And then when you hit another bad one, you're like, I'm just the worst wedge player. I'm the horrible wedge player. And you kind of feed your own narrative and create your own narrative. And that's probably what Justin Rose did when the numbers said, you're literally one of the best in the world at this. So, you're not bad at this. Like, we don't need to spend any time here. So tracking your stats and understanding what parts of the game you need to work at is really important. And there can be very, very big discrepancies for players of the same skill level. So on your tour, there's probably a bunch of 10 handicaps on your tour. You could put 3 10 handicaps all next to each other. And the first one putts like the typical average 10 handicap player. Mm-hmm. The other 10 handicap next to this person putts like the typical scratch player.
Yeah.
And the one next to this person putts like the typical 20 handicap. So you could have, and remember, you step on the first tee. What's your handicap? I'm a 10, I'm a 10, I'm a 10. They're all 10 handicaps. They're all going to get 10 blows being out there. But one of them putts like a scratch. The other putts like a 20. That is a wild difference in skill level. A scratch putter versus a 20 handicap. And you will find that with 10 handicap players. So knowing what you need to work on is really important. So if all three of those players came to me, the player that putts like a scratch, I'm like, you don't need any putting work. Like we're never going to, just maintain and keep your skill. The player that putts like a 20, we're going to work on your putting and we're going to get that better. So I don't mean to go down a stat rabbit hole, but it's so important to know that for your own game if you want to get better, so you know exactly where to focus your time.
I mean, that makes complete sense.
Yeah. And I don't know if truer words have ever been spoken on this, but I'm just sitting here shaking my head because literally it's stuff we deal with on the regular. And to your point, like, I think that's why there's this misconception of like, don't get me wrong, there's definitely sandbagging everywhere you go, right? But there's a lot to what you were just speaking of. You can get a small sample size of guys, and one could be a phenomenal driver of the golf ball, one could be a great putter. All of these different attributes are so mixed in between. But you'll get a guy who, say, is maybe like a D driver, right? And he hits the ball and everybody looks over, they're like, this guy's not a 12 handicap. But then you get him, mid-range, and he's throwing, maybe darts with his wedges, or maybe he putts like a 7 handicap opposed to a 15. So there's all these different, variables that take place that I don't think people really, I think they neglect to see it, to your point earlier. And then, what's great about it is it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, all of those strokes or all those, pops that people are getting are essentially deducted anyways. And then you kind of find out, your true potential. So, I just think there's a pretty cool correlation to the example that you just gave, though.
Yeah, definitely. And you bring up always an interesting topic, sandbagging.
Oh yeah.
It's a hot topic everywhere, isn't it? That's for sure.
It is, and I weigh on the side of, I always give the benefit of the doubt, and I like to hear the backstory, and we definitely do our due diligence here, and we do some detective work, and we have guys upload scorecards. We'll even pull the phone out and give a random attester a call and say, hey, tell us about Bob's round last week. What did he get on 4, if you remember? Like, there's a lot of things that we do to kind of combat it, but you're obviously always going to have it, right? Especially at your most notable tweets is the club championship, right? They always seem to come out during club championship times. But I think what we were just talking about has a lot to do with that, because I think guys only see a certain part of somebody's game. They're like, there's no way this guy could be a 5 handicap, but they don't play a full round with him. They maybe see the shot where, or the category of his game that he maybe is, the worst at. They don't really see his best shots or a collective number of shots over a period of time. So I think a lot goes into that. I don't really necessarily think you could kind of gauge somebody by playing a couple holes with them.
Not at all. Yeah, not at all. And so I actually very recently did a pretty in-depth analysis on tournament scores versus casual scores. It was really interesting to see across, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of rounds, how people perform in casual rounds versus actual tournament rounds. And I think by and large, I tweet about it and joke about it quite a bit. And I think by and large, people are very honest. And I think, legitimate legitimate sandbaggers with their handicap are pretty few and far between. I think pretty much people are honest. And anybody can go on a heater for 4, 5, 6, 7 holes. Like, I could get a quarter out right now, and I could flip a quarter 10 times, and heads could come up 8 times.
Mm-hmm.
It could come up 9 times. And that doesn't mean heads is 80% likely going forward. It's not. It's 50-50. But over a short run, people can play well at any handicap level. They can play well. And so I agree completely with your point that it's really impossible to judge somebody after 3, 4, 5, 6 holes, because anything can happen over 3, 4, 5, 6 holes. Now, I think there's potentially Some people that game the system a little bit. Yeah, I think so. Sure. But I think that is the rare exception, and is not very common in my opinion. I'm still going to tweet about it because it's funny, and I like to bust the chops of my buddies that I call sandbaggers. So
sure,
1,000%. Yeah. Again, going back, Rob, how many DMs and emails do we get about? And it's
but
crazy.
You're right though. Anybody, you can't go on a heater. You could have the round of your life once in a while, right? So
you can, yeah, for sure. But listen, if we play together and you beat me that day, you're a sandbagger. That's just how it is. Like if you take my money, if I have to pay you at the end of the round, you're a bagger. Right. That's just my standard rule, and I think it's 100% correct.
Right. No, I'm not going to argue that one. Yeah. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. I don't like when you get in my pocket, so that's me just being a little angry there for about 5 minutes, and then I get over it.
So going back to some of the stats that we just talked about, Lou, where do you think amateurs should be spending most of their time, whether that's on the range or practicing? Obviously, it's fully dependent on their game, right? Maybe if they're struggle putting, but let's just take a standard amateur who's pretty average in all facets of his game, right? From your data, what does the data show you where amateurs struggle the most?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're talking about the typical amateur that performs like, let's say they're a 12 handicap and they perform like the typical 12 handicap in every part of the game, right? There's not, they're a great driver of the ball, but they're a horrible putter, and that offsets in their 12. Sure. Let's say they're just a 12 handicap ish across all facets of the game. If you want to get better, you got to be a better ball striker. And so off the tee and iron play is extremely important. And the farther away you get from the hole, the bigger the skill gap becomes. So, Brad Faxon, Denny McCarthy, my co-host on my pod, Greg Chalmers, those are the top 3 putters in the history of the ShotLink era. And if we had a putting contest with them from 6 inches, we're just as good as they are, right? We're never going to miss. They're never going to miss. We're going to be just as good as they are from 6 inches. Now, if we go out to 8 feet, they're going to be a lot better. Now, if we start to get irons in our hand and we get out to 175 yards, they're so much better than we are from 175 yards as a typical amateur. This is actually something we talked about recently. I'll quiz you guys on this one because I'm pretty sure I remember this correctly. So PGA Tour players from 175 yards in the fairway, what percentage of their shots, again, PGA Tour players, 175 yards in the fairway, what percentage of their shots finish more than 90 feet from the hole? So more than 30 yards from the hole.
I think I know this answer. So I believe I've seen it on your Twitter. Okay. I'm not 100% positive, so I might be DQ'd. Rob, have you seen this before?
I did not. So okay. I'll let you take this one.
Rob would be okay. What do you think percentage wise?
65%.
Lou, wasn't it somewhere around like
this is outside, so outside of bad. These are bad shots. Think of it this way: how many bad shots do they hit from 175 yards?
Wasn't it roughly a third? Somewhere
1%. 1%.
Wait, what?
1%. So they're really good. They only hit 1 out of 100 shots more than 90 feet from the hole from 175 yards. Right? They're getting it on or around the green a huge chunk of the time.
Right.
But 15 handicap, 41% of the time, which is a massive difference in skill. It is just, there's miles and miles of difference between a tour player and a 15 handicap.
Yeah.
They're not even playing the same sport.
No.
So it's just a massive difference. So if you want to become a better player, you need to be a better ball striker. So you need to hit the driver as long as you can, making sure you take into account penalty strokes and other hazards. So get the driver out there, learn how to make really good contact with it, become a good iron player. And that is the biggest difference between, us weekend warriors and really good amateurs. So you got to become a better ball striker. Now, this doesn't mean you should stand on the range and, rake 7-iron after 7-iron and hit driver after driver. There's some ways that you can practice effectively, and most amateurs are not practicing effectively. They're practicing very, very poorly, and it does not lead to lots of skill development. So I would strongly, strongly encourage you to find a good instructor to work with. Try not to go down the self-serve rabbit hole and figure it out on your own. Get a good set of eyes to help you not only with creating a swing that's functional. And I use the word functional. It doesn't have to be pretty. We're not all, built like Adam Scott. We're not all going to swing the club like Adam Scott, but we can have very functional swings. So work with a teacher that's going to help you to create a functional move. And then also, work to get some effective and quality practice habits. And there's a lot that you can do, even in your own home while you're, standing in front of the TV in your living room. There's lots of things you can do that are going to help out your game. So, but I would encourage you to not go solo. Find somebody to help out with that for sure.
Ball striking is definitely, I love that answer. It's not the answer, to be honest, that I thought you were going to give, but it absolutely 100% makes sense.
Now, yeah, there's definitely, I would say the add-on to that is, like, if you're not the typical player, which most of us aren't, most of us are not exactly average. If we're a 12 handicap, we're not exactly average in every category. There's something that we typically do better. So you might be a great putter and a horrible driver of the golf ball. You might be a horrible putter and a great driver of the golf ball, which is why it's really, really important to know your stats in your game, because you're not the same as every 12 handicap out there. Right. And if you know the weak parts of your game, you can focus on those and help to take your weak parts of your game and make them stronger, which is a pathway to improving quicker. If you're a great driver of the golf ball or you're a great putter, people sometimes tend to skew towards working on the things that they're good at. And we need to work on the things that we're not good at. And tracking your stats and understanding where you fit is really important, so you can make intelligent decisions about where to spend your time. Now, if you have 8 hours a day to practice, you can, you get a lot of latitude to spend however you want. But if you're like most of us and you have very limited time, you have to be like a ninja with how you spend that time.
Right.
Definitely.
So there's something that I've always, like, I'm very interested in the up and down game, right? I feel like as an amateur scrambling all the time, is there specific proximity from the green where amateurs have a better chance of getting up and down from?
You want to try to get the ball as close as you possibly can. Okay. From wherever you are, laying up to your favorite yardage on a par 5, not a good idea. You want to get the ball as close to the hole as you possibly can with every swing. So a good rule of thumb is advance the ball as far as you can, as often as you can, making sure to take into account penalty strokes and other types of hazards, trees, OB, water, all those things. So laying back to a yardage you're more comfortable with is costing you fractions of a shot. And, are you, the way that when you look at the data, and this is true for tour players, it's true for amateur players, you'll start to see, big deltas in things like proximity and other stats. If you go from 200 yards to 175 yards, like, they start to hit the ball a lot closer. Mm-hmm. And if you go from 175 yards down to 150 yards, they definitely, they do better from 150 than they do from 175, but that difference starts to get a little bit smaller. Right. And so when you go from 100 yards and in, every yard closer, you're going to start to get a little bit better. But you're not going to, it's not a massive difference, right? And so that's why, when you're 40 yards away, 50 yards away, 35 yards away, does it feel great to hit it to 18 feet? No, it really doesn't. But you are going to, on the average, hit it closer to the hole from 40 yards than you will from 85 yards. So you're trying to get the ball as close as you can. When you're talking about, approach shots that are going to be, where you're able to hit the green, the most important thing to consider is, where's the flag and how can I not short side it? And so, not short siding yourself in golf is extremely important.
Mhm.
When you short side it becomes a whole lot more difficult to get the ball up and down and make a par. And it's something that the players that I work with, it's one of the things that we focus on. And I don't just look at where the pin is. If I have an approach shot to the green, I want to know where the pin is, and that's going to help me pick a target. And then if I want to start to understand how dangerous that target is, well, I want to know how close is it to the edge. Okay, it's right at, it's 4 yards off the edge. Okay, well, that makes it even tougher. I don't want to short side it for sure. And then I want to know like the slope around the green. So if I happen to short side it on that side, what's the slope of the green doing? Is it running away from me? Would it be uphill? If it's running away from me, this starts to make that short-sided shot even harder. I want to know elevation change. So how much elevation change is there between the level of the green and if I miss the green on that side? Anything more than 2 feet, it is kind of an inflection point where that starts to get a lot harder. And so if there's a 4 foot, 5 foot drop between the level of the green, and if I miss the green on that side, that's another red flag that I throw up. And then I'm also interested in the wind and the wind, not just the wind on the approach shot, but what is the wind doing when I miss the green and I have that little chip shot, pitch shot, flop shot? If it's downwind, it makes it a lot tougher. And so, if I have a pin that's cut on one side and the green would be sloping away and it's more than a 2 foot, elevation change, and it would be a downwind, chip shot, flop shot. Like those are 3 massive red flags, and I'm shifting my target way away from all of those things because you've all been there. Like you're a golfer, right? We're all golfers here. You've been in situations where you've short-sided it. You're in the rough. It's downwind. It's running away from you, and the green is 4 feet above where you are. Like you're hitting that to 25 feet, 20 feet all day long. And the only way you're making par in that situation is by hitting it to, hitting a 20-foot putt and dropping it. And what also happens in that situation for us amateurs, which makes it even more of a red flag, is we get there and now we're trying to hit these cutesy little flop shots and we still leave it. We miss the green.
Yeah, right.
It's short.
Yep.
And now we're in the same kind of situation. So, make sure you're taking into account where the pin is. We want to avoid short siding it. And we want to try to get the ball as close as we can, as often as we can. So I know it's a lot there, a lot to untangle, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of guidance on how to tackle those things.
That is super interesting. I would have thought numbers would have been maybe a little bit wider compared to, and this is just arbitrary, right? So maybe a 50-yard shot you have left, right? Compared to, let's say, like a full 58 at like whatever, say 85. Somebody's a full 58. So don't you think amateurs often think because it's a full shot at, say, 85 compared to hitting a half 52 or even maybe a 3/4 54, that they believe that, that's a better shot for them opposed to the closer to the hole?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of amateurs that believe that. And I did a really deep dive in Arcos on this, where I looked at players and I compared them to themselves. So I found players that had a ton of shots in and I forget exactly what the numbers are. It's out there on Twitter somewhere. But I looked at how they performed from, in those partial wedge ranges, 40 to 50 yards, 50 to 60 yards, those partial swings. That's not a full swing. And then I looked at how they did in more full swing shots, like 80 to 90, 90 to 100, full swings for most people, 100 to 110. And there was only a minuscule percent of players that were better with the full swing. And what was interesting is when I looked at those players, it was pretty obvious because I found these players. It was a really small percent. I forget what it was. I want to say it was maybe 3% of the players, 4%, 5%. It was a really small number. And I looked at those players, and so these are players now that they were actually doing better with a full swing. The other 95% did better from closer. These players did better with a full swing. I looked at those players around the green, and it became pretty obvious pretty quick that they probably had a pretty severe case of the yips going on, which can like their chipping and pitching around the green was horrific. So I'm guessing all of those players that were struggling with those partial shots had some yippage going on. So, if you fall into that category, then, I can understand. I've seen a few people struggle with that. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So,
right.
But if that's not you, then you need to get the ball as close as you possibly can. And, so what did you say? 85 yards? Was that what you said? 85 yards versus what?
Yeah, I think I throw out 85 and 50. Just
all right. So 85 for a 10 handicap. Is 10 handicap a pretty fair number? You got a lot of people on 10 and you're
10 to 12. Yeah.
Right. So all right. So 85 versus 50 yards is a difference of about 0.14 shots.
Wow.
So 0.14 shots, 85 versus 50 yards. So you're going to be on the average if you played a whole bunch of shots from 50 yards, a whole bunch of shots from 85 yards, you're going to average 0.14 shots higher from 85 yards than you would from 50. And all of those little chunks, they all add up, right? So is it, are you going to save 3 shots by doing it? No, you're going to save, 0.14 in every situation, but those little fractions all add up. So if you're constantly laying back to a full number and you're doing that 3 or 4 times a round, you're costing yourself a half shot per round by not trying to get it closer.
Right. And going back, Lou, to kind of your approach into an approach into the green, I thought this was actually pretty interesting. And kind of my next question is, don't you think that amateurs would kind of fare better if we kind of just took the pin out of the equation and went to the center of the green for every approach shot? Is there some kind of data behind that? Obviously, if you have a tuck pin, say maybe 5 and 7 off the left, right, and you have a bunker, short left. Obviously, we don't want to be left. You don't want to be short sided. Is there some type of data that you could, give us that kind of correlates with just going at the center of the green, 2-putting and getting out of there with a par?
In many situations, that would be wise for amateur players. Again, it depends on your skill level. It depends on the situation. It depends on how big the green is. If a green is massive, aiming to the middle of a green that is 12,000 square feet is very different than aiming to the middle of a green that's 3,200 square feet.
Sure.
So we want to hit as many greens as we can. We want to get the ball as close as we can. So we're trying to balance those things, right? And so always picking the middle of the green is not exactly what I would tell someone to do all the time.
Yeah.
Firing at every flag is not something I would tell someone to do. So it's important to try to hit as many greens as you can and also still try to get the ball as close as you can, which means sometimes you're going to short side it. You just will. You can't, if you played ultra conservative, you're going to, you'd miss too many greens. You'd be too far away from the hole. So you kind of have to find that balancing point. And, sometimes you're shifting targets away from the middle of the green to avoid trouble. Like us amateurs, we're typically not very good out of the bunkers. And so you need to start shifting away from those things. And then depending on the situation, there's one of the players that I work with, one of the college players I work with, and he's really, really good. He's, top 10 in the world amateur golf rankings, played in a couple of majors last year. He's a good player. And there was an event that we were prepping for. I forget where it was. It was out in the West somewhere, Arizona or somewhere. I forget where it was. But there was a hole that was just a par 3 that was just crazy, stupid, difficult. It was full carryover water, a green that was ish, and it was like from 180-ish, right around there.
Mm-hmm.
And the green was like as shallow as 12 at Augusta. It's all over water. There's this giant hump behind the green with like it was knee-high grass. There were like triple the amount of like doubles on that hole as there were birdies. It was such a crazy difficult hole. I think it averaged like 3.7 or some crazy numbers, a par 3 for D1 college players. And in that situation on that hole, the target that we had for this player was off the green. Like he was not trying to hit the green on this par 3 because there was no safe spot anywhere on that green for this player to try to hit the golf ball because the green was just ridiculous. Now, could he have taken it at some of these flags? Sure. Would he have hit the green some of the time? Sure. But there was way too much trouble in play with how shallow the green was, the water that was in play, and essentially the hazard that was over the green. So, just by default, kind of going back to your original thing, saying center of the green all the time. It's not all the time, but for us amateurs, it's going to be a pretty good chunk of the time. That's for sure.
Definitely. That is also very interesting. Well, we'll wrap it up here. This last question, Lou, kind of correlates with what I just asked you. What's the most important stat relative to scoring for amateurs? Is that fairways and regs, green and regs, number of putts? Something that you kind of see that's very glaring when it comes to amateur stats?
Well, one, I would tell you that if you are if you're motivated to try to improve, I would encourage you to start tracking stats where you're going to get strokes gain data on yourself. So Arccos is going to give you that. Not a sales pitch for Arccos. I mean, ultimately, I don't care if you do this on the back of a napkin, but if you're trying to get better, you need strokes gained information. The old stats that they had are not very good. They're not a true indicator of performance. Putts per round is something a lot of people keep. It's a horrible stat. If you have 30 putts that day, that doesn't tell me anything. You may have missed a ton of greens, right? So you may have only hit 2 greens that day, and you were around the green 16 times, and you hit 2 greens. And so when you're around the green 16 times, you're chipping, and you're very, very likely to chip the ball a lot closer than if you're hitting an approach shot from 125 yards away. That chip shot is going to, on the average, end up closer to the hole. So you're starting closer to the hole. So you're going to naturally have fewer putts.
Sure.
So, if you have 30 putts and you hit 2 greens, that's very different than having 30 putts and hitting 16 greens. Those are 2 very different days with the putter. So that stat is not very useful. So I would encourage you to do something and use something that's going to give you strokes gained. If that's not your cup of tea and that's not what you want, the most important stat I would tell you is greens in regulation. That is going to have the highest relationship between, how good of a player you are, your skill level is. You want to hit as many greens as you possibly can. There's some things to be aware of there. There's some nuances there. There's a club that I played at a few years ago here, really, really tiny greens, super tiny greens. And so if you're at a club that has really, really small greens, you're not going to hit as many greens. If you play at a course that has greens that are massive, you're probably going to hit more greens. So you have to be aware of the course that you're typically playing on,
right,
and how big the greens are, and you're going to have to adjust that a little bit in your head. And so greens in reg, extremely important. Fairway hit percentage is kind of useless. I don't really care if you hit the fairways. Fairways are the most overrated stat for amateurs. I just want you to keep the ball in play.
Right.
I want you to hit the ball relatively solid with your driver or whatever you're hitting off the tee. Hit it relatively solid. And that last comment was directed at you, Rob. So little poke to try to get to hit driver a little bit more.
Wait, call me a sandbagger and that.
Yeah. I can say that because I'm a big keyboard tough guy because you're way over there and I know you can't get at me. So fairways don't really matter. I want you to keep the ball in play, and I want you to limit how often you're hitting it into trouble. So we want to minimize penalty strokes, minimize hazards, minimize hitting it into the trees, just keep the ball in play. For amateur players, there's not a huge difference in playing from the fairway versus playing from the rough. So PGA Tour players have a pretty big discrepancy from a similar yardage. So whatever yardage you want to pick, 150 yards in the fairway versus 150 yards in the rough. On the PGA Tour, depending on the rough height, it's going to be anywhere from 0.2 of a shot, a little bit less, to a half a shot, with maybe around a third of a shot being kind of typical. Amateurs typically only have about a 1/10 of a shot difference, maybe a little bit more, 10th to an 11th, 0.11 shot difference from fairway to rough.
Yeah.
So it's not that we play rough that's easier. I think overall that might be true. It might not be true. A lot of rough on tours, 2.5, 3 inches around there. They certainly let it grow as the week goes on. There's a lot of courses I'm sure you play where they cut the rough twice a week. And if you catch them on day 3 and they haven't cut it in 3 days, it can be pretty long and hairy.
Right.
So it's not that we're playing easier rough than them. It's just they are so much better from the fairway than we are. So they're taking advantage of being able to control their golf ball from the fairway, where us amateurs, we can't do that as well. And some amateurs actually, depending on the rough and the course, they're actually maybe a little bit better from the rough than they are from the fairway. Some amateurs, depending on the rough and what it's like, because us amateurs, our low point control isn't always great. It's certainly not as good as a tour pros. And so when we have a ball that's fluffed up just a little bit, our low point, that's where the club is striking the ground. Typically we want to hit the golf ball first and then the turf after. Us amateurs, we're not all that good at it. When it's fluffed up a little bit, it gives us a little more margin for error. So being in the fairway is not important at all. That was a long-winded way for me to say, don't track fairway percent. Track, how often do I keep the ball in play? Like,
Right.
What's my in play percent? Like, when I want to know the percentage of tee shots where I have a reasonable opportunity to hit the green in regulation. So that's either from the fairway, from the rough, relatively wide open swing. I'm not coming out sideways from the trees.
Makes sense. Eliminate the big miss, eliminate penalty strokes. Fairway versus rough was very interesting. I'm assuming, to your point, a lot of that has to do with spin, especially for tour players from the fairway, compared to amateurs.
It's spin where you don't know what kind of spin you're going to get out of the rough. It's a guessing game. You're going to guess a little bit, and it's going to be a little bit reduced, which is, on tour, it's going to impact their ability to hold shots, but they're not exactly sure what spin is going to come out of the rough. Depending on how it's sitting, they're guessing a little bit, and they don't have as much control over their golf ball because they're not exactly sure how it's going to spin. So I wish I was as good to care about those kind of things, but I'm not. So stop tracking fairways and just get it out there and keep it in play.
You're at like a 2 handicap, I believe.
Yeah, I'm 2.4. I was down around scratch for a lot of years. This is a while ago before my daughter was born. And then, kid, family, job, all the things that get in the way of golf. I went from, being, between I never got to the plus side. I was 0.1 was my lowest index ever. I would hover between, in the 1s and 2s, down occasionally dipping into the 0 points. And then I was up, between, 6 to, 10 when I was hardly playing. And then over the last few years, I started to play a little bit more, and now it's back down to, I finished the year at 2.4. Hopefully I get to plus this year. That's the goal. I've never gotten there. We'll see. It's going to take a lot of work.
Yeah. So you could play. You could definitely play.
So you're the sandbagger. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I don't know. I go into my pocket all the time with my buddies. So, and they take each one of those dollars that I give them and they remind me.
Right. Well, Lou, we appreciate you coming on. Thanks for the time. Thanks for the great stats. As always, definitely give Lou a follow on Twitter. Like I said, one of the best follows in the game, especially for, our target audience, our members, guys looking to get better and trying to figure out, in terms of stats, how you could do that. So give Lou a follow. As always, Lou, we appreciate it, and best of luck in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. And I'd love to get out and play in one of your events this summer, maybe. That'd be fun to make that road trip.
Absolutely. Come on out.
Go.
All right, Lou. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right, folks. Welcome back. Rob, what a unbelievable episode that was with Mr. Lou Stagner.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to put the 3-wood away more and take back the driver out and just go for it, I guess.
Yeah, super eye opening. Again, unbelievable. Lou he gets it. He speaks our language. We love having him on. I think we are going to have him on again, hopefully shortly, but he loved it. He's all for it. He said kind of the same thing. Your audience is great because it's the guys that I'm tweeting about. So,
right.
Thanks again, Lou. And Rob, we're going to jump right into the top 3. Are you ready for the top 3 this week?
Yeah, let me hear them.
Okay. Well, this is kind of a stolen top 3 from Bob Does Sports' I think last episode.
All right. So
I want to know, Rob.
Bob Does Sports. Got it.
Yeah, I want to know, what are the top 3 things you hate to do?
I didn't see that Bob Does Sports last week, so I'm kind of interested to see what they said. Top 3 things I hate to do.
Well, I'll give you a hint. So, like, example, a couple of theirs were like laundry.
Oh, okay.
Dishes, like stuff like that.
Number 3 would be like, I don't know how it is at your house, but like, one weekend you do, a surface clean, and then the next weekend you do a deep clean, and then the following week you do a surface clean type deal thing. And I hate the deep clean. It just, you work Monday through Friday, and that's the last thing you want to do, especially when there's football on or golf on a Sunday or a Saturday, and just, tackle the house and do a deep clean. Right. So that'd be my 3. Number 2, I hate having to take out the garbage Tuesday mornings, like roll it to the street. Like that irritates me. Like growing up on the South Side, you just walk out to the backyard, you throw it in the fucking can, and you walk back in the house. Like, it's 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, rolling it out there. That's just, I hate it, especially when it's cold out. And then my number 1 thing I hate to do is raking fucking leaves. I hate raking leaves.
Raking leaves is for the birds, Rob.
Oh, I hate it.
So, okay, a couple things. So you're manually still raking leaves?
I do. We do like a fall spring cleanup, but like,
right.
From the service. But when, he comes and does it, the first week in November or the second week of November, you still have leaves.
Do you have a leaf blower?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't blow, you just don't blow them off?
Well, I mean, I have the corner lot of the cul-de-sac, so I have like 2 huge trees. I got neighbors' trees. It's a shit ton of leaves, man.
You guys have a service that comes in vacuum, or
no? I wish like Hinsdale and Lyle have it, but we don't have it. You have to bag them, and they take them for free, but you still have to bag them. I can't just blow them into the street, so that's where it kind of sucks.
Yeah, that does suck. And yeah, you do have a big lot, so that is annoying. I have a couple similar ones. Number 3 is the garbage, not just because it blows, because you got to bring out the garbage and the recycling, but also like during the nice weather, you also got to bring out the third can, which is the yard waste. But it's not even so much doing that, like the actual labor. It's remembering to do it,
right? Because
if you miss a week, it's like, especially if you have like a big week. And you look like a hillbilly, and your garbage can's overflowing. It's like, fuck. It's like, it's basically just the weekly reminder / during the winter when you forget about it, and it's like, like you said, 6 a.m, it's freezing out. You got to roll. Yeah. So
snow, like fuck that.
Yeah. Cans is number 3. Number 2, I'm in the same boat with you as in terms of like a deep clean. So I fell in. I took the bait. I don't know how to politely say this, but there was, some conflict here in terms of cleaning. So I took the bait. We hired a cleaning lady. She comes like every 3 weeks.
No, we had that pre-COVID, and it was great. She came like every other week. I would go right back to it, but
it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than coming home to just an immaculate house. And to your point, it's more of just like a surface clean. But it's great to have, and it's worth it because you're not spending, your Saturday, Sunday, 3 hours, 4 hours cleaning. So it's helped all around here. So,
sure.
Yeah.
The morale is different. I get it.
Yeah. Number one, hands down, laundry. Can't stand it.
Why? I don't mind laundry.
You know why? Because
is it the folding?
No, it's the same thing as a train. I don't like being on a schedule. I don't like being on somebody else's schedule. I don't like having to wait for the clothes to be done. And if you don't time it right when they come out of the dryer, you got to re-dry them.
Oh,
so it's a death cycle. You just got to keep doing it. Same thing with a washer. If you leave them in there for like a day or two, they start to stink. You got to wash them again. So you got to like.
Wait, who in the right mind does a load of laundry and just lets it sit in there for a day or two?
I'm just saying, like, if you throw in, say, your last load, and you're running around for a day, and then you come back, go to do some laundry, it's like, well, shit, I'll just rewash it. But mainly, my thing is like, I don't like being tied up for like 2 or 3 hours just for laundry.
Sure.
If I'm sitting on the couch and there's a load in the dryer, sure, I'll take it out and fold it while I'm watching TV. But yeah, laundry stinks. Hate it. Just not my cup of tea. I'll take the dishes all day. I'll take washing floors. I'll take anything else besides laundry.
Interesting. Yeah, I meant to say honorable mention is the kids' toys. Like, you could straighten up all you want, and then you turn around and it's right back to toys fucking everywhere.
Good. Dude, it's just a constant. Now that she's moving around and flying around, you're just like a constant vacuum. You're just picking up after. It's crazy.
It's a bad.
Oh yeah, that is a great honorable mention. Or that are just like little hand marks everywhere, like on the walls, on the cabinets. It drives me insane.
The picture window drives me insane. I can't tell you how many times I tell my kids to take their hands off the picture windows, and it's just.
I mean,
and my TV. And my TV. It's fucking
I just walk around with a magic eraser in my back pocket. Just follow Lily around. But no, what a great episode. Again, Lou was great. Can't wait to have him on another time. But until then, Rob, we'll
hold on. Don't forget about the merch drop.
Yep.
You guys listen to this tomorrow. You got till Monday, January 30th to get your orders in. Got quite a bit of those in the last week, so that's good. And then don't forget the golf show coming up too next month.
Yes, the end of the month golf show at Rosemont. More importantly, the merch drop. Definitely get your orders in. But until next week, Rob, we'll see you in the fairway.
See you in the fairway, Tom.
See you, buddy.